Welcome to Real World, Real Talk. I'm your host, Dr. DZ Cofield, and you're listening to your member-supported public radio station, The Choice, 90.9 on the FM dial and KTSUradio.com. We are your community station. I'm excited today. I got to tell you, I'm excited because I have a friend of the show with us. Gave us such insight the last time he was on, and as I was thinking about who we need to come on to help us think through the emotional and mental toll that COVID-19 is taking on our community, there was nobody else that I could think of that would be better than Dr. Napoleon Higgins Jr. We'll be introducing him in just a moment. Just a couple of housekeeping matters before we get started. First of all, if you'd like to follow me during the week, you can follow me on Instagram at DZ Cofield. You can follow me on Twitter at DZ Cofield, and you can follow me on Facebook at DZ Cofield. Those of you who would like to follow me on Facebook, I want to thank all of my Facebook friends. I actually had to change my page in order to be able to welcome more of you into that virtual relationship with me. And so I want to thank you for following. And for those of you who are listening in on today, I'm really, really grateful for this opportunity to serve you and to help you navigate your way through COVID-19. Without question, we have been hit with something that we have, or at least the majority of us have never seen in our lifetimes, something that hasn't hit our country in over 100 years. And it's amazing when you listen to the words of former President Barack Obama in 2014 as he is admonishing the Congress and our government officials to prepare for a coming pandemic. And he talks about 5 years from now, maybe a little longer. This was in 2014. So it's amazing that he talked about this pandemic, and he talks about it in reference to the Spanish flu. And man, this dude like really is looking almost Nostradamus-ish. So really excited to be able to talk about it. Today's show is titled Keeping Your Sanity While You Stay at Home. Keeping your sanity while you stay at home. And I think for many of us, we've just been trying to navigate this thing and figure out our best way to get through it. And part of the challenge has been we've kind of gotten it in drips and drabs. You know, it was, okay, we're going to stay in a week. Okay, lockdown for 2 more weeks. Okay, lockdown for 2 more weeks. Now, you know, it's like, okay, another month and a half. We may be practicing social distancing or physical distancing for another 3 or 4 months. I mean, we just don't know. And now the scary thing is we're seeing countries who were ahead of us on the curve, who thought they were safe in opening back up their communities, and now they're seeing a spike in COVID-19 infections. And so now they're sheltering back in place. They're locking back down their countries. And we have a president who is saying he wants to open up as soon as possible, looking more at the economics of COVID-19 as opposed to the healthcare crisis that it has caused. And so, you know, at the end of the day, this uncertainty has left all of us with a sense of angst and a sense of stress and anxiety. And the question is really not, are you going to face it, but how you manage it. I'm excited to have with me Dr. Napoleon B Higgins Jr. He is a child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist in the Houston Clear Lake area. He currently serves as owner, CEO, and president of Bay Point Behavioral Health Service, Incorporated, and Southeast Houston Research Group, Incorporated. He also practices as the medical director of Hold My Hand Residential Treatment Center. He is the staff psychiatrist for Prairie View A&M University. He is also the co-author of the book Mind Matters, a resource guide to psychiatry for Black communities. He specializes in treating mental health disorders through medication management, psychotherapy, and behavioral training. He treats mental health conditions while considering everyone's individual situation and personalizes treatment to fit patients' individual needs. Welcome to Real World, Real Talk. Dr. Napoleon Higgins. Dr. Higgins, man, thank you so much for being with us. Wait a minute, hold on. I got to give you your props. Got to give you your props. And man, let me do this. Yeah, let me do it the right way. Got to give you applause. All right. Man, thank you for being with us today on Real World, Real Talk. First of all, welcome back. Man, what is going on in your world as a psychiatrist in the midst of this COVID-19 pandemic, and how are you faring in your family, first of all?
Wow. Well, I tell you what, this COVID-19 does not discriminate on giving angst and stress, so essentially, I feel what everybody else feels, the lack of certainty, the change in lifestyle, the movement issues, and where you can and cannot go, and trying to stay safe, trying not to be ill, trying not to be sick. I'm happy to say that my family is doing well. Everyone is sheltering in place. Luckily for, my primary family, we're all essential workers. So we're all able to work right now, so that has been a blessing. But it has taken a bit of an adjustment, as is for everyone. And I want to thank you for having me on today, Dr. Cofield, and having the insight and understanding that we need to focus on our mental health. We need to stay safe, but also staying safe includes staying safe with your mind.
Yeah. About a month ago, I asked the question in the form of a survey: are you more concerned with catching the coronavirus, or are you more concerned with the economic impact that the coronavirus is going to have on our community? We've been hit with a double whammy here in Texas, not only by COVID-19, but also the fall in oil prices. And so we've had layoffs on top of layoffs. And man, we haven't seen these kind of numbers since the Great Depression. I want to talk about some of the basic emotional issues that people are dealing with. A friend of mine posted on Facebook, and he said, man, is anybody else having trouble sleeping, like going to bed late, waking up early, or am I the only one? And all of these comments were like, me too, me too, me too. There are things that we are facing and going through that I want to help people understand today are norms. They are not abnormal. So let's talk a little bit about some of the normal things that you're going to face during a time of upheaval like this, because with our work being interrupted, our daily social life being interrupted, our family life being interrupted, many parents now are becoming homeschoolers and principals and headmasters and teachers in their own homes. I mean, just all that's going on. Can you talk about some of the normal things that you're going to face? Because I think in isolation, as most of us are, you might think you're the only one going through this. And so I really want to help our listening audience understand that this is normal, that there's some normal things that you're going to have to deal with. The question is, how are you going to manage that?
Well, yes, definitely. So you have to look at the normal stress response that all of us will have. So essentially, when there's a stressor, and this is a real stressor, then your body reacts as if it needs to get charged up and ready to go. So essentially, you feel a little anxious. Well, you should feel somewhat anxious if there's a pandemic going on, which is threats to your livelihood and to your family. So your body's going to rev up, get ready to go, and it's going to cause an increase in cortisol levels in the body. So cortisol is basically the response your body makes to stressors to get your body keyed up and ready. So the thing about not sleeping much, well, under threat, your brain is saying, well, listen, we can only sleep so much because we need to get ready for the next day. Or it's trying to run what are all the different options that we can do right now. So you're going to have an increasing amount of stress, but then also you have an increase in maladaptive behaviors, where essentially, because we feel there is a threat, then we create threats around us that may not be there. So we become angry with our spouse, or we get upset with the kids, or many people are starting to drink too much, trying to calm themselves down, trying to smoke cigarettes and all other kind of things, and marijuana, trying to escape their current situation. So we got to look at these are normal adaptive responses to a community threat. We got to go through it. It's going to be there. Don't think you're alone. Don't think you're by yourself. Just realize that this is something that's going on around the community and the group. If somebody tells me they're not stressed at all, I probably believe either they're in denial or that they're lying. All right. We're
Wow.
all stressed right now, but we don't want to be maladaptive in our behaviors and what we're doing and how to respond to them.
I want to highlight some of the outbreaks, some of the effects that stress can have, and want you to pick any of these to talk about. According to the CDC website, stress during an infectious disease outbreak can include fear and worry about your own health and the health of your loved ones, changes in sleep or eating patterns, difficulty sleeping or concentrating, worsening of chronic health problems, worsening of mental health conditions, increased use of alcohol, tobacco, or other drugs. One of the things that you just hit on that I think is very interesting is this idea of keeping yourself healthy mentally. And there's been so much emphasis on food insecurities, which also exasperates some mental health issues as well, along with just the stress, man, of going out and you know, you go to the supermarket and is the shelf empty? Are you going to find what you need? And just on and on and on. What are you saying to your patients? What would you say to our listening audience regarding managing your mental health condition?
Well, I would say, realize that, you're not going through it alone. And then at the same time, look at what you can do. Too often when we're not being mentally adaptive, we're looking at what is not working, what we are not able to do, versus looking at what we can do. So essentially, we have to realize that there's been a paradigm shift. We've been knocked off our axis, where essentially this is what is comfortable, and now we moved into uncomfortable, and that this is a new norm, or at least if it's not, which hopefully will be temporary, but now we're just put in a different spot. So essentially the thought that I'm going to go to the grocery store and be able to find whatever I want to find, whatever I find, and find the right one and the right type, that may be changed right now, all right? But because you can't find the right type of toilet paper that you love so much for the last 20 years, does not mean that you can't switch brands. Or the fact is, essentially, we can't be willy-nilly with this, so far as, it will always be at our disposal. So then we have to become a little bit more creative. We got to order things online. You may have to call somebody. Let me borrow a couple rolls real quick. But also, now you're having the time when you go. So you know that, in the evening, 7 or 8 o'clock, after everybody's been there and the shipment is showing up, you may not be able to find it. But the fact is that, if you showed up earlier in the morning or went to a few more off-beaten places where everybody's not going, you can find it there. I don't know anyone who can't find toilet paper, but the fact is that it's becoming more stressful. But even the reaction to toilet paper, we have not seen that this virus causes a lack of toilet paper. But people are trying to shore up whatever they can.
Sure.
And the anxiety and stress is causing us to run and try to grab at whatever we can, thinking that this will assure that we will be okay. But the fact is that having extra toilet paper, or I know some people must have boxes upon stacks in their house right now, that does not keep away the virus. But so often people are looking for, what can I do to shore up my safety at this point?
Yeah, and I told somebody, if you tell me I got to stay in for 15 days, 30 days, and I've got 4 people who are now in the house all the time, eating out of boredom, not eating because they're hungry, the toilet paper usage is going to go up, milk, bread, rice, potato, whatever it is, all of that is going to quickly go out of the house, especially if I have school-aged children. I want you to react to some of the major negative feelings that I've heard people articulate regarding COVID-19, and give us some insight into these feelings. I found them interesting. The first one is people who had jobs, careers, and viable businesses feeling like a failure, even though the situation they're in is not their fault. Talk about that feeling like a failure, because it's amazing to hear people who were on top of their game, who had, if they were entrepreneurs, their businesses were booked, if they had restaurants, they had customers coming in, and now they are like at a complete loss and they don't know what to do. Can you talk about that?
Yes. Well, right now, some trying times. Things have happened that we did not expect. It's hitting some major industries, major people who had worked hard, did everything they were supposed to do. And now you're getting this, this trip up in the road. And I tell people, well, if you've made it before, chances are you're about to make it again. But God has now put you in a different place, a shift, and you've been thrown off balance. I would tell people it's kind of like this, if you've ever, obviously we don't remember the first time we took a step, not unless you had a major injury and had to redo this whole thing over. But that was a time where you had to take a major step, where officially as a child, in order to walk, you stood up, and then you had to put one foot out forward. In order to put one foot out forward and make movement and walk, essentially you had to throw your body completely off balance. And so now we've been thrown completely off balance. I would look at what is our ability to adapt and what can we now do? I've seen where restaurants are closed, okay? And you don't have the money to keep it open. Well, the fact is that people still got to eat, but realizing that people will not be sitting down and ordering from a menu and things of that sort. So what adaptation can you make to that? Also, sometimes it may have to cause you to take a step back, realizing of where you're at and then what are your other options. And so often many people will find that they'll find that next move, but so often that fear of failure is an issue of fear of what I will look like in front of other people.
Yeah.
And that I was on top of things. I don't know, maybe I was a motivational speaker about how everything goes well for me. But then we're facing this own reality where now we're having difficulty with our own fears. And what would that look like to other people? You have to get back to the basics of what's really important, which is, food, clothing, shelter, safety is really what it comes down to. So, right now I know that, issues with homes and cars and payments, but a lot of people are forgiving those things right now. And I tell people the issue is not the problem. The issue is the lack of a plan for the problem. So even in business, I've been up and I've been down. I've had more than one business. I've had businesses done well. I've had businesses that I've had to close. But when it's going down, you just don't, with the pilot trying to hold the plane in the air, if things are looking bad, they just don't tank the plane. Essentially, you're trying to do the most controlled crash that you can do, which is getting down to the basics of safety. You need to take care of yourself, your family, shelter, food, clothing, and safety is really what the major things will be. And trust me, when this all passes by, and it will, you've already got the skills on how to build it up, not unless you just got lucky one day. So if you can do it once, you can do it again. But realizing that you're not starting from point zero. You're not starting from point zero because you've gained the knowledge and information. Two, I do expect for this whole season to pass as well. And it may be extended, but as long as you're taking care of those most basic things, that's what's most important. So essentially, I know people are worried, you got 3 cars in your house and you only got 2 people driving. Some things may not be needed right now. You have more than one home. Some of these people who are big ballers have got more than one home. You may not need the second home right now. And it's embarrassing to having to let some things go. But and I really believe that most of us will be able to hang on to everything. We're just waiting our time out. But if not, have that controlled plan of this got to go, this got to go, this got to go, this got to go. And sadly, now you're having families having to move in with each other. Sometimes we may have to move back into grandma's house that we've been renting out. Or some of it's just been sitting there idle for a while. Or we may have to move back in when it ain't that, to make that move. But the fact is that as long as you want to make sure you take care of those basics, once you think of what is most important, a lot of the other things are a lot of fluff that you can let go. But I'm expecting that while we're trying to figure this out and what to do, a lot of things I don't think are going to go away. It's just a matter of having to shift to the next thing.
I think one of the key words that you use is adaptation, that the things that we thought we could not live without, we're finding out that we have to live without them. The people that we thought we couldn't live without, we're finding out that we are able to live without them and survive. And it's going to be interesting to see how we come out of this. But I love that phrase. The issue is not the problem, but the lack of a plan for the problem. Something that we have to focus on. And I think this is something that many of us are being forced to deal with. That's my sense as I'm hearing people talk about some of the things that they're dealing with. Many of the things that they're dealing with, they have learned how to avoid, not have to deal with face to face. And whether it's a relationship with a family member, a spouse, a child, or whatever the case may be, working through those issues. And I want to come back to that a little bit later on. One of the other negative feelings that people have is this sense of being afraid and really being challenged on identifying the source of that fear. Help us understand what that fear is, what that being afraid is that many of us know we're feeling it, but it's kind of hard to identify the enemy. I mean, part of it is COVID-19. Part of it is the impact of COVID-19, of what's going to happen. Help us understand that fear that we're wrestling with.
Well, right now we're in uncertain times. So the fear can be difficult to understand because it can be multifold. The one is, am I going to get sick and pass away? Who's going to take care of my family, my home, my children, my livelihood? Most of us are not expecting to pass in the next week or so. We think that's going to be somewhere down the line. So identifying that it could be the illness, it could be the losses, it could be the loss of status, loss of friends, realizing that if you get sick right now and pass away from any disease, that you probably will die alone at this point. They're not letting people in the hospital just to come around and visit and take the risk of infecting other people. So right now, the fear is multifold. What I would recommend to people is if you do have fears, and this is one of the best things that you could do, is write down what all you fear. So instead of ruminating and just letting it roll in your mind, realizing that, I'm fearing getting sick, I'm fearing on my finances, I'm fearing my children getting sick, my spouse has to leave the house as an essential worker, and then, I don't want to get sick, and then what if my kids get sick, and what if my spouse gets sick, and then, what if they bring home something, and then what about the finances? And the problem becomes you start fearing the issue about getting sick about 5 times, all within about 30 seconds. By writing it all down, one thing after another, you can then see what it is, and it causes your mind to have to delineate and focus and think, because you had to take it from your mind through your motor apparatus to actually having to focus and concentrating on writing it down. Write it down, make it plain. See what it is. And then from that list of everything that can make you feel poorly, I would say when you start wondering again, look back at the list so it can organize your mind again. Once you have that list of each thing that you're worried about, I would write down a plan for each one of those things. If I get sick, all right, what do I need to do? Is my life insurance paid? All right. If you don't have life insurance, it may be a little late to get it once you get sick. But is my life insurance paid up? Do I have a will ready to go? Have I identified the things that I want to leave for different people? If I'm a single parent, then where will my children go? Who would they be with? So the biggest fear is the loss to yourself. Now, the loss to family members, all right? Then the loss of finances. If I lose my finances, then how will I support myself? Well, if I have a job, now I have to file for unemployment. We've forgotten about the side hustle. I don't know if there are any side hustles. Anybody needs to clothes wash, car wash, anything like that. There used to be something that we had before we had welfare. The other thing is, do I move in with someone? Do we combine families, combine incomes in order to make this thing work? So then my spouse. Well, what can I do about my spouse having to be an essential worker? If your spouse is essential worker on the front line, then your spouse, what we do, and my wife's a pediatrician. She changes clothes in the garage. All right. She wears a set of clothes to the garage, puts on her scrubs, puts on her white coat, walks out, has the N95 inside the car or at the job, walks in, does the job, comes back, changes clothes, put the clothes in the bag, sit them, wash machine, take a shower. So what can my spouse do to mitigate their risk? What can my children do? How will I get my children educated? All right. Knowing, so the fear of the lack of education, because that is something that we got to definitely worry about. What do we got? Do we have all the assignments? Where, what does each teacher want them to do? And having that written out so that you can see your fears and then see the answers can help to reduce the fear. Now, as a new fear pops on, write that down. But generally, you're ruminating over less than 10 things all the time, and normally there's a top 3. And if you can write out the plan for each fear, then and you can review that plan, a lot of that will help to decrease that.
If you're just tuning in, you're listening to Real World, Real Talk. I'm your host, Dr. DZ Cofield, and you're listening to The Choice, 90.9 FM and KTSUradio.com. We are your community station. I'm happy to have with me Dr. Napoleon Higgins, who is the owner, CEO, and president of Bay Point Behavioral Health Service Incorporated, and he is a co-author of the book Mind Matters, a resource guide to psychiatry for Black communities. I think some people are in the cycle of grief and don't know it, don't realize it. And I think part of it is because if they haven't been trained in this area, if they haven't stepped back for a season and identified it, they really don't understand what that cycle is. So let's talk about this cycle of grief and loss, because I think that's a big thing that people are going through, and they're not even aware of it. That cycle starts with, so let's just go in the order, I guess, that they normally are given in. First, denial, which I think everybody in this country was probably in January and February, including the president. You know, just in denial that this is going to hit us, that it's going to come to the U.S. This is the China flu. You know, the China virus is not going to be that bad. We're going to be able to get on top of it, even though we didn't have the support services that were in place when Ebola came on this country, or H1N1, and we saw lives lost, but there was a plan, there was a strategy in place. But there seemed to be this idea that somehow, because we're Americans, we're going to be exempted from having to deal with this, not like people in China and then later on in Europe, not like those Italians and not like the Spaniards. You know, we're the USA, and we seem to be in denial. Did you sense that early on in terms of how we were looking at this and how we were preparing for it?
Well, I'm really confused myself about this, and this leads to the angst, anxiety, and fears that we have. Is that how bad we got it and how we got it so wrong? I think what could drive the fear is it denial or is it the lying that's going on? I don't know a medical person who did not feel that this was airborne over a month ago. Because of the rapid spread from hand to mouth, you can't spread it that fast from hand to mouth. You know, the fact is that it's spreading too quickly. So I think a lot of denial and the issue of just lack of preparation. So, and I think a lot of people are still in denial right now. I have no clue why when you go to the grocery store, with this being an airborne illness, and I think it's primarily airborne, why aren't grocery store workers all wearing masks? I went to a pharmacy where I saw the pharmacist had on a mask, but the pharmacy tech did not. If somebody's ill, this is where they're going to go to pick up their medication.
Right.
So I think we're still like suffering in denial, even with us social distancing, we still have people passing away. All right. So the fact is that we've got to make sure that we keep doing what we can do, and that maladaptive behavior of being in denial is something that can actually get some people killed. You know. Yeah. So not only do you want to not get it, but also you don't want to spread it to other people as well. So the fact is that that is a serious issue that's going on with our representatives, but as us as a country as a whole. But the fact also is that the social distancing is working. We're curving off the numbers. You know, the fractions are changing every day because more of us are sitting at home, social distancing. We're talking to people over Zoom and over these different platforms, FaceTime and WhatsApp, using these different platforms to connect but not see each other. And trust me, that's working. We've got to keep it up. And the fact is that the denial is still going on so many different levels, from the up top, all the way down to the bottom.
I got to tell you something. So I'm listening. What, a month ago when somebody asked about wearing a mask? Nah, you don't want to wear a mask. You don't need to wear a mask. masks won't help keep you from getting the disease. It'll help you, keep from spreading the disease. And while the health official is saying it, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, this dude, it must be like the puppet on somebody's lap, because while he's talking, I'm watching these health workers taking dead bodies out of that Washington State nursing home, and everybody has on masks. And so I'm thinking, okay, if I don't need to wear a mask, why are they taking out a dead COVID patient with mask on? Like, no, I think that's going to help me. And me having traveled to China a lot, I tell people all the time, it's not abnormal to see people in China walking down the street with masks on, whether it's the pollution or as a result of SARS and other viruses that started. Hong Kong, mainland China, Beijing, Shenzhen, Shanghai, it doesn't matter. You're going to see people wearing masks all the time. And so it was like, are they really trying to convince us that we shouldn't? And then all of a sudden, of course, a couple of weeks later, hey, it'll be a good idea to wear a mask to keep from spreading the disease. And it's like, hold up, man. No, I'm going to wear a mask to keep from getting it from somebody else, along with not spreading it.
Well, the thing is that we've got to listen to your public officials, but we also got to use common sense. And so if your brain is telling you that, hey, maybe I should be doing X, if it doesn't hurt me and it doesn't hurt someone else, then let me go ahead and take that particular precaution before I wait to hear from someone. But I know the last time I got on a plane was a month ago. And they had just started talking about COVID. And so the social distancing and all of that had not been put in place.
Right.
And I thought to myself, I'm going to put on the mask. So I get to the airport and I noticed that I'm like the only person with a mask on. So I'm like, maybe what I'm thinking, maybe I'm just slow. Maybe I'm overly cautious.
Right.
I don't get it. Because
Right.
TSA doesn't have on masks. All right. The air flight attendants don't have on masks. And then as I sat on that airplane, I was like, you know what? Where that mask at? I'm going to put this thing on right now, because you can't tell me this is not airborne, even though they keep saying it's not needed. Also, the thought that your mask doesn't work. Well, that's true. Most people are not walking around with an N95 that's been fitted and they've been, tested their face and all that. No, you don't. But barriers help. Any barrier is better than no barrier.
Right.
So essentially, if you have on a cloth mask, the sponge mask is the weakest. The cloth mask is next. Then you have your surgical mask, and then you have your N95s and the respirators and things of that sort. But any type of barrier, even if it's just the best barrier is distance. You over there and I'm over here, and we ain't nowhere near each other. I'm in my house, you're in yours. But if we do have to interact, putting that distance in between, but also 6 feet, honestly, is really not enough. When it comes to persons breathing and respirations, 6 feet is really the minimum that you need. Is 6 feet or more. So the fact is, you got to use your own personal understanding. Masks do work. One thing that I've done is, like, I do have cloth masks. I do have a few surgical. I have 0 N95s because I'm really not coming in contact with people. We need to reserve those for frontline healthcare workers like my wife. My wife needs to be able to find an N95 to go to work with, because she has to be close up on little babies and newborns and things of that sort. But the fact is that what I do is I spray mine down with Scotch Guard.
Gotcha.
And I relayer it, because it actually helps to thicken up the fibers and the stickiness across it. Realizing also that, you got to wash the mask. All right. So essentially, you don't want to have you perspired on it and then you cough, and then whatever you had on that last week is now out on the world. Plus, what the world has is back on that mask that you're on as well. So we've got to make sure we clean them, that we wash them as well, and do our part.
Yeah. The denial and the lying, I think, has moved a lot of people to that second stage in grief, and that's anger. And I'm seeing a lot of people now who are kind of like, WTF, like, what is going on? Because it seems like every day we're getting new information. There are some public health officials who are admitting publicly that we don't know. The person who seems to know the most is the least qualified to speak, and that's the president. He's sure of everything, from the medicines that will work to everything else. He has these great feelings and good feelings, and I'm looking at Dr. Anthony Fauci and other one, and Dr. Birx, and I'm going, I don't see them nodding their head yes. There's like no affirmation. I'd hate to play poker with Anthony Fauci, I'm telling you, because he's giving like no indication, but he's saying what needs to be said, and you can read between the lines and hear what he's saying, and you're like, okay, nah, that's not the way to go. How do we process that anger? Because I think that anger rooted in fear and frustration and in some ways just feeling hurt and betrayed is all part of it. And how do we manage that?
Well, we manage it with knowledge and information. So essentially, it angers you. And I can't lie. I don't know a medical personnel, anyone in medicine who's not angry. Doctors, nurses, orderlies, people cleaning out trash cans. I mean, because the fact is that there are certain things that we know about viruses that we've been ignoring from day one. All right. Also, pandemics it's something that we don't face often, but it's not something new. So as medical personnel, we do receive some hours of training in what to do in case of a pandemic. Realizing that pandemics have happened, it's just this one is new and hitting home hard for us. But we saw SARS just a few years ago. All right, Ebola did hit our shores as well, even though in a small amount, and we were able to contain it. But the fact is that I would try to fight the anger with information. One of my favorite channels that somebody put me on to is the doctor's channel on XM, which is XM 121 or 121. That gives the most up-to-date, most informative information that to me seems to be free of politics. So I can't lie. Of any emotion that I have right now, Dr. Cofield, and to the KTSU listeners, I have a lot of anger myself. In that we still are giving out bad information, and the thought that when we did not say that it's respiratory, a lot of people still don't believe the need to wear a mask out in public, and they're spreading the virus. My thought is that I want to see the world get back to work and back to our normal activities. The more we shut it down with better information, the quicker we can get back to normal. But this anger that we have, the way you want to use that is to use it for more good information. That's what you want to do with your anger. Do your research, do your understanding, and I would say listen to the people who have the MDs and the PhDs, who are working in the field, and try to stay away from the politicians. Honestly, this stuff is really deep that we're trying to work on. We're trying to save the world. Politicians need to get on TV and tell us where the testing sites are, how we're providing for the community. Yeah. This is what we're doing for you as your elected official. But politicians should not be talking about virology and epidemiology and infectious disease. Even me as a psychiatrist, I went to medical school and I've got thousands of hours in this information. But if Dr. Fauci's on television, I'm listening to him at this point.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. And, it's interesting that you say that, because several weeks ago I had Mayor Turner on, and one of the questions I asked him was, what made him make the decision early on to pull the plug on the rodeo, which came with a lot of criticism, as opposed to the mayor of New Orleans going forward with Mardi Gras. And we see the difference in the numbers thus far and how the pandemic has spread because of those two major events being handled in a different way. And he said something that I think was profound and made perfect sense. He said, I listened to the medical people. When the medical people said this is a problem, I didn't think economics. I thought health. And I thought what was in the best interest of our community in terms of health. We can make more money, but we can't regain that health and save people's lives if we allow this pandemic to run rampant. So you move from anger to depression. And I've got to tell you, Dr. Higgins, I have some friends who are pastors, and there are two groups that I've been praying for. One, pastors who have seen their congregation decimated by this. I have a friend in New York who has lost 11 members to COVID-19 And I think he has another 20 to 25 in the hospital right now who are fighting COVID-19. And it has pushed him to a place that he has never thought. And he said, man, when I get through this, he said, I'm going to get some professional help, man. I've got to. He said, I'm fighting through this every day. He said, man, but I lost 5 members in 10 days. You know, every other day somebody was passing. And, you know, he the only time he's really going out is to go to the cemetery and do a cemetery, gravesite service, and then going back home. And it's been really tough on him. But also the members who have lost pastors. And I know of at least 5 churches in that New York metropolitan area, and there are more around the country, whose pastors have succumbed to COVID-19. Family members who have lost multiple family members. I was reading today an article with a lady out of Flint, Michigan, whose husband died, and 2 days later, her 20-year-old son passed away, her only child. He passed. I'm thinking about the family in New Jersey who had 4 family members die after being at a social event that they had every year. And that inundation of just death and dying and just being hit and just kind of being beat down, help somebody address that, because I think that there's some of us who are depressed because of what we're going through. And then there's some of us who are finding ourselves depressed because of what the country is going through. And, you know, when you watch a lot of television, and I'm forced to watch it because we have our child care center and we're trying to support essential workers, and, you know, and so I'm watching it from that perspective, making sure that we're following the CDC guidelines in terms of our children and their parents and all of those things. So I have to watch it. But man, I got to tell you, there are just times I'm just like, I'm literally just, I can't watch anything. I don't want to watch anything. I don't want to hear anything, because it can just get overwhelming. Can you help somebody with that, and help me with that?
Well, yeah, these are difficult times. So the thought about the depression that can hit, you have to look at, you know, say, for example, the pastor. He can wait until all this is over, or he can go ahead and get help now. There's no need to wait, for the storm to be over to go and reach out for help. So most of us, I know, in mental health are generally doing telemedicine. There are some of us still seeing paid clients in the office, but I think that's highly unsafe, and I would not recommend that at this point. We're now we have all this social media and whatnot. So one, reaching out. So one, he reached out to you, and you all can share, administer to one another. But also reaching out to sometimes if you need a professional, reaching out to a professional, because realize if a person has a large congregation, they lost 11 members, but realize they didn't lose everybody. They didn't lose the majority. It's a small fraction. You still have to go out there and minister and take care of your flock. So if something is keeping you from doing that, let's go ahead and lock in right now. Realizing that everybody's not under the gun. Everybody's not in New York. And you have a lot of friends, a lot of places. So let's jump on that now. And also you have to worry about, learned helplessness, where essentially because we keep losing over and over and over again, we start to feel that we can't win at anything. So therefore, we just kind of let the tide push us whichever way it's going in or out. And we have to fight against that thought that I've had so many losses, I prayed so hard to the Lord that nothing seemed to have happened. So therefore, now I give up and I stop praying and I stop thinking that the Lord is hearing me. And my thought is that if you've got a congregation of 300 and you lost 11, that's a lot of people. If you had a congregation of 100 and lost 11, that's a lot of people. If you have a congregation of 30,000 and lost 11, that's a lot of folks. But you've got to think about the rest of the folks who still need to hear you, who need to hear a word from God. And my thought is you want to focus on the work of the people who are here. You want to comfort the families, and you want to try to take care of yourself and your family and keep your focus in the right place and not give up. So I would focus on the work. And then you have to look at those who are not being impacted. So essentially, you may have 11 folk in this congregation who've lost somebody, but you may have another congregation in New York who's lost nobody. And those healthcare workers and first responders who are not seeing things, who can have this guilt that they're not helping out as much as they can. And also, you got to learn how to take care of yourself and shut it down. And when I say that, I'm referring to you got to learn how to take a breath for yourself and step back from some of the actions. Give yourself 8 hours or 24 hours to decompress of your feelings and your thoughts. Sometimes you've got to turn that television off. And many times it's just too much. You just heard too much, you saw too much, and sometimes you just need to calm down and back away to readjust yourself so that you can jump back into the fight. No warrior can fight 24, 48, 72 hours a day. You have to take away a step back from the front line, take a deep breath, maybe have somebody else to answer the phone who will let you know, tell you what, give me a good 8 hours, give me 12 hours. I need 2 hours before, 8 hours of rest, 2 hours decompress, take some air in, maybe have me a good meal before I jump back into the fight. So no one can be on the front line and battle constantly. All of us need to take a break, look at your resources around you so you can jump back in and be effective on the next go-around.
Yeah, one of the steps that typically people will skip or seem to bypass in this cycle of grief and loss is bargaining. And I think this is maybe one of the most prevalent, some listed before depression, some listed after depression, but the inability, and you talked about this earlier, the inability of family members to be able to be there with loved ones, the inability to hold their hands, the inability to comfort them is, for many of these families, the most difficult part of this process. And I can only imagine, there's a saying that there are no atheists in foxholes. And this is a war that all of us are engaged in and we're fighting. And I'm sure there are people who are questioning their faith, whether they have it or not, questioning the existence of God, whether they believed or not, just a turmoil theologically that they're dealing with. And I know you're a man of faith, but can you talk about that turmoil? Because this is one of those events that's really challenging people to think through what your faith really is. What do you really believe about God, and what do you really believe about having faith in him, especially if you're praying and your loved one is lost and you're not able to be there. I'm watching the news this morning in Detroit. They have so many bodies that they're literally just stacking the bodies on top of each other in refrigerated trucks. I mean, it looks like, a wood and being stacked next to a fireplace. I mean, it's so dehumanizing in a very real sense. Can you talk about that challenge to your faith in the midst of this kind of crisis?
Well, if I'll try my best to speak on it, I would probably ask that question of yourself. My doctorate is an MD. But being a believer, the challenging of your faith, understanding that one thing that I'm happy that I did a while back was I actually read the entire Bible from beginning to the end of it. So by doing so, it gave me a different understanding of life and death and the battle that we're in, realizing that the fact is that we all must pass away at some point, and trying to stay on a good field of thinking so far as while you're alive, trying to make sure that you always tie off those loose ends, being a comfort and a comforter to other people on a regular basis. Now, the thought is, it's so dehumanizing to see that this battle is going on and so many good folk are losing. But I wouldn't say, that we lose in Christ, because in death is to be with the Father. But the most precious thing that we've been given is life and trying to sustain it. So realizing that the thoughts that good people can't pass away, that's not true. All right. The thought that if you try to do everything right, that you'll be okay, that's not always true as well. What you want to focus on is what you can do right now, and being a benefit to yourself and to your life right now. So essentially, if you're ill, make sure you call your doctor. If you think you're sick, go stand in that line for that COVID testing. Do all the necessary steps you can and focus on what you can do in your living point right now. And too often, I think that I'll say it, I think too often we as Black people will live in the spirit versus living in the physical. And the fact is that, yes, God can do all of those things if he so chooses, but he also may choose not to do. But he's giving you the physical things that you can do right now to save yourself. If we're made in God's image, then life and death are also in our hands. So the granted that God can make his own decision. And when he calls his children home, who are you to tell me when I can say my child comes home? That's like me going up to pick my child up from daycare. They've been like, no, we want to keep your child here. No, this is my child. All right. Y'all got to, you got to play with your friends for a while. But at some point, we all got to go home. And so if God calls you home, that is not necessarily a bad thing. God wants to see you at the house. I know if my mom, if the street light came on and I wasn't home, and I saw that front door open before I walked in it, I knew that was going to be a problem. So when you get called, you get called. But let's pay attention to the things that we can do. It reminds me of the story about the man who was highly religious, who said Jesus was going to take care of him when the hurricane came. So he got the notice on the news: take shelter. Jesus is going to take care of me. He got the phone call to the house. The sirens went off. The policeman knocked on the door. The fire truck went by. The boat came by. The helicopter dropped the basketballs on top of his house. He said, Jesus is going to take care of me. He drowns and passes away. And he said, Jesus, I thought you were going to take care of me. He said, well, I put it on the news. I knocked at your door. I drove the fire truck down the street. I even put myself in the helicopter as the pilot and dropped the basket down for you to come up. And you wouldn't do it. What else were you expecting me to do? So realizing those physical things. So we've got family members who fast. We've got close people who fast. Now is not the time to give up and become helpless. Let's try to do what we can do at this point to help save ourselves and listen to God's word in the physical of what he says that you should be doing at this point.
If you're just tuning in, you're listening to Real World, Real Talk. I'm your host, Dr. DZ Cofield. You're listening to your community station, The Choice, KTSU 90.9 on the FM dial in Houston and KTSUradio.com. We're talking to Dr. Napoleon Higgins, and our show today, Keeping Your Sanity While You Stay at Home, how to manage COVID-19 and keep your sanity while you're doing it. The last step in that cycle of grief is acceptance. And I'm not sure how many of us are there. And I know you can go back and forth between the different steps and stages. So some people are going to go back to anger every time they listen to a press conference and you're hearing stuff that's just not sounding quite right, or you hear the denial of people in terms of their failure to take responsibility for what's going on. But I think there's a part of our country that is finally getting to acceptance. Not all of us, but we're finally getting to the place that we recognize this is not something to play with. This is a deadly disease. It is taking people out of here. You've got to take this serious. How do we help people get to that place? I'm concerned because I see young people, for example. One young lady had all of the symptoms of COVID-19. The only symptom she didn't have was a fever. And I said, look, you need to stay home. Like you need to quarantine for real. And she was like, why? I'll be okay. I just need to get some rest. And I said, COVID-19, that's why you need to stay home. And she literally looked at me as if I was talking a foreign language. And I'm like, don't you watch the news? And she was like, no, I don't watch the news. And I'm like, holy cow. I mean, so for a generation of people who only get their news through Facebook, and really, if they see anything from a reputable news source, they're not looking to read it, right? They're looking for interpretations from friends and whatnot. How do we help people get to the place where they accept this and then do what they need to do in order to get through this?
Well, that's hard. That's hard to say. And the fact is that, as you stated, in those, steps of grief, and loss, you can bounce back and forth where, you're good today, but then something difficult knocks you off the axis tomorrow. So, just trying to educate people, to where you're at, what we're doing, and understanding that there are things you can do to help try to prevent the spread of this virus, and accepting where you are and what you can do. Now, one thing that I found that's scary to me is I've seen people who believe they're in acceptance, who are also in denial.
Yeah.
Where they say, I accept God's will for whatever he has for me, what am I to do to change that? And I think that could be a dangerous place as well. You know, so we got to make sure that we're in our acceptance. We're accepting what all that we can do. I had one of my staff members, you know, the mailman came. And so, I took the mail and I sprayed it down with Lysol, and then I hit the hand sanitizer. And then she was like, well, you know, where is your thought of God and God being able to protect you? I said, well, God told me spray this down with Lysol, and God told me to get this hand sanitizer. I don't know what God is telling you,
right?
But that's what God just told me right now. You know, so the thing is that we want to make sure that in our thought of acceptance of the situation, that we're not in the helpless denial mode of that as well. So there is a need to have that anxiety going. There is a need to have that continual, that vigilance, that insight that comes with the stressful situation. So we need to keep that in, you know, so I think acceptance is the ability to adapt to the situation and continue to do what you can do with what you have at your fingertips to keep yourself safe.
Dr. Napoleon Higgins, owner, CEO, and president of Bay Point Behavioral Health Service. Thank you for being with us again, brother. You always add so much to our conversation and really appreciate you. The late Vernon John said, if you see a good fight, get in it. I always add, if you don't see a good fight, start one. And the fight for your mental well-being is as important as your fight for your physical well-being. Until next time, this is Dr. DZ Cofield signing off. You're listening to KTSU 90.9 on the FM dial. Real world, real talk on your member-supported public radio station, The Choice, KTSU, your community station. Bye-bye.